Just tell me once why you don't eat your Hasenpfeffer, eh?
Und don't you saubraten Betty.
And when I must once more tell you to eat, then I will right away send you out from the house out. So, you hear? I won't have it. I won't have it. You go to school in the morning and you stay there all day and you work hard and you study hard and you come home and you won't eat a thing.
Oh, come on, Betty.
I say, what is this? What is this? I won't have it. I won't have it. Why did you say something? Why did you say something? And why your father is not? What's this? What's it loose? Don't talk to me! Don't talk to me! Put no butter! I won't have it! I won't have it!
What's the matter?
They always pick on me. They never let me be. I'm so very lonely, awfully sad. It's a long time since you've been glad. But I know what I'll do. By and by, I'll eat some worms and then I'll die. When I'm gone, you wait and see. They'll all be sorry that they picked on me. I'm not afraid. Are you, Bimbo?
No.
Folks, now here's a story about Minnie the Moocher. She was a red-hot hoochie coocher. She was the roughest, toughest frail. Minnie had a heart as big as a whale. Hoddy-ho-dee-ho. Hoddy-ho-dee-ho. Hoddy-hoddy-hoddy. Hoddy-hoddy-hoddy. Hee-dee-hee-dee-hee. Hee-dee-hee-dee. Hoddy-ho-dee-ho. Hoddy-ho-dee-ho. She messed around with a bluff named Smokey. She loved him though he was cocky. He took her down to Chinatown. He showed her how to kick the gong around. Showed her how to kick the gong around. Howdy, 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 howdy. She had a dream about the king of Sweden. He gave her things that she was needing. He gave her a home built of gold and steel, a diamond car with the platinum wheels. Oh, ski-bop-doot-dot, let it do. Oh, ski-bop-doot-dot, let it do. Ski-bop-de-googly-ski-bop-de-good. Ski-bop-de-googly-ski-bop-de-good. Ski-bop-dun-dun-dun-dun-daddy-o. Ski-bop-dun-dun-dun-daddy-o. Haddy-haddy-ho. Haddy-haddy-ho. He gave her his townhouse and his racing horses. Yeah. Each meal she ate was a dozen courses. She had $1 million worth of nickels and dimes. She sat around and counted them all 1,000,000 times. Oh, dee-ho, dee-ho. Oh, dee-ho, dee-ho. Dee-ha, dee-ha. Dee-ha, dee-ha.
The finest in underground television.
I sent my soul through the invisible, some letter of that afterlife to spell. And by, my soul returned to me and answered, I myself am heaven and hell. Heaven, but a picture of fulfilled desire, and hell, the shadow from a soul on fire, cast on this darkness, into which ourselves so late emerged from, shall so soon expire. We are no other than a moving row of magic shadow shapes that come and go, round by the sun-illumined lantern held at midnight by the master of the show. But helpless pieces of the game he plays, upon his checkerboard of nights and days, hither or thither moves and checks and slays. Then, one by one, back in the box he lays. The ball no question makes of yeas or noes, but here or there as strikes the player goes, and he that tossed you down into the field, he knows about it all. He knows. The moving finger writes, and having writ, moves on. Nor all your piety nor wit shall lure it back to cancel half a line, nor all your tears wash out one word of it. And this inverted ball they call the sky, which under crawling cooped we live and die, raise not your hands to it for help, for it as impotently moves as you or I. With earth's first clay they did the last man knead, and there of the last harvest sowed the seed, and the first dawning of creation wrote what the last morn of reckoning shall read. Yesterday, this day's madness did prepare. Tomorrow's silence, triumph, or despair. Drink, for you know not whence you come, nor why. Drink, for you know not why you go, nor where. From the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam, translated by Edward Fitzgerald.
What you see before you is a show about questions. It is about puzzles and conundrum, enigma and riddles. What would you ask, you may ask, and this is what I will now seek to explain. Deep in your psyche, questions exist that no mortal has dared to utter. Some hunger in the fabric of your being that must be fed. We seek the wild questions of your mind that roam untamed by the intrusions of the outside world. The questions that you bring here today will provide you answers and perhaps even insights. A veritable cornucopia of possibilities exist. Before you lies a gateway into instant access to the answers that puzzle and mystify the human mind. We are not interested here, however, in questions of a mundane nature. We seek the questions that have no answer, for Dr. Hal possesses the knowledge that can only be drawn from a life steeped in classic, esoteric, and underground resources. Dr. Hal will, especially with lubrication provided by generous offerings, be your source and guide to the panoply and myriad wisdoms to be found in the more exotic realms of thought. To invest in your wisdom, monetary donations may be submitted to our tip jar website, which is being displayed at the bottom of the screen. Questions may be asked directly on this site and will be read on the show. You may also pledge a love offering in our audience chat, and our ever-present stage ghost will forward you a link to Dr. Hal's tip jar. It will be my responsibility to present your question as well as your love offering to Dr. Hal, who will then expound upon it in a way that only Dr. Hal can. Especially good questions, or ones that we feel are worthy in a more monetary way, may receive a special recitation from Dr. Hal himself. So get those questions and love offerings into Dr. Hal so that we can drain his brain for the betterment of all Yeti kind.
Greetings, Pontius. I am unable to hear you, I fear.
There we go. I looked over at my microphone and the button wasn't flashing. And it was like, oh, well, the microphone's on. And then I just looked over at it again. It was flashing. Gremlins.
They'll get you every time.
Gremlins.
So how are you?
I am well. How did you enjoy festival season?
Yes, I did, though I'm somewhat thankful that it is over.
I'm ready for a little bit of a rest after this.
Yes,
It was quite a roller coaster ride the month of July.
that it was.
Of course, the show did experience some bad news recently, and we'll talk a little bit about that later.
Yes.
I'm sure many people are aware we lost one of our cast members. But the show will go on. So but again, we'll talk about that a little later in the show. And
Well, as long as we have questions, we can continue, and I assume that you do have some.
we certainly do. And I have a question here from Reverend Griffin, and it's a $9 question, Dr. Hal. And it
Very
said,
good.
and it's not quite a question, it's more of a statement, but I kind of like where it's going. What if we pretend that airplanes in the night sky are shooting stars?
Well, first of all, that is a question. It has an interrogative dimension, and one could put a question mark after it very easily. But what if we pretend that the airplanes we see in the night sky are shooting stars? Then we must be interested in the fact that they do not shoot, but persist as they travel across the sky. Usually, if someone sees a meteor and says, look, a shooting star, by the time you look, it's gone. It flashes in only a moment. But the dependable track of a flying device created by human agencies is something that lasts and persists. Once in the desert at a Burning Man event, I was waiting in the middle of the night to take place in some procession, but there was a holdup, and so we were waiting around as we were, and suddenly someone said, look at the stuff in the sky. I looked, not expecting to see anything, but there were apparently a group of shooting stars following each other across the sky, taking about 30 seconds to make the transit. This proved to be a damaged Russian satellite entering the atmosphere, breaking off pieces of itself, which trailed after it as it entered the sky. If an airplane or Russian satellite falls, then it has become a shooting star. But naturally, for the safety of those aboard, we should not wish this. But a meteor is only a meteor until it reaches the ground, at which time it becomes a meteorite and is no longer either a star of any kind or shooting. Thank you for your question.
Dr. Hal, I have another question here. It's from Jenny Blue, and it's a very simple question, but possibly not a simple answer.
Perhaps.
What is wrong with people?
Well, what is wrong with people is a great question that many people have sought to answer over the years. It's Mark Twain's conundrum of the damned human race. What is wrong with people as a group is that they tend to embrace things out of fear or out of peer pressure, which are not good for them in the long run. The mob mentality. And it is difficult to separate this from one's actual needs, beliefs, and aspirations held in reflective tranquility. But also, what is wrong with people is that they are trained to resolve pains of a physical or intellectual nature with the swiftest possible remedy. And as we know from our deep studies, the swiftest remedy is not always the true remedy. Some bring the problem back again in greater force than before. One should be able to react to problems and difficulties because this is how we surmount them, but the faculty of the intellect, the peculiar achievement and distinction of humans should never be abandoned entirely. That's what we think here on the Ask Dr. Hal show.
Dr. Hal, I have a question here from Reverend Onan, and it is a $9 question, and he says, please speak freely upon the theme of the ship of Theseus. Thank you.
Well, the ship of Theseus bears our thoughts forward, and it bears those which we have individually formulated forward. Like any ship, it has a voyage to run, and like any ship, it is in danger from hidden, perhaps metaphorically subaqueous shoals and snags, perhaps undersea marine monsters, to carry it a little further, are waiting to drag it under. But it takes maintenance, skill, and seamanship to make the ship float and sail. It is not enough to advance a thesis, but one must protect it, and one must, if necessary, as it so often is, guide it on its way, with consciousness that it may go astray and get into lost, far-poured oceans from which it cannot be retrieved.
Well, Dr. Hal, I'm going to take this opportunity to let our question queue build up. I'd like to remind our audience that it's not the Ask Dr. Hal show without your questions. So get them into our Ko-fi site, or to make things easier, if you don't want to jump out to a different website and all that rigmarole, we trust you. So if you have a question for Dr. Hal that you would like to have a love offering accompany, just put that in the chat. We trust that you'll get it to us somehow, and our ever-present stage ghost, Saint Joyce, will make sure that question gets into my hands to ask Dr. Hal on your behalf.
Just get it into the hopper.
Get it into the hopper. We want to get those questions to Dr. Hal. If we don't, if Dr. Hal can't answer these questions, his brain begins to swell. We have to drain off those questions. So, but moving smartly forward, I have bees. We have bees coming up next. So,
let's see how your bees are doing.
This month we're actually going to take a closer look at a hive, but hopefully it'll be interesting too. So, here it comes. In this installment, I would like to give you a much closer look into a beehive. Hives are intricate and fascinating structures inhabited by truly remarkable creatures. To really appreciate them, we have to take a closer look. Structurally, a hive consists largely of boxes called supers. The supers contain frames. Much of what we will be looking at today takes place on the frame part of the hive. This is where the bees build the wax structure called comb. Comb serves as both a food storage location as well as a laying chamber for the queen bee to place her future brood in. On this frame, we see stored honey in the capped cells. The yellow bits are stored pollen. In this time-lapse video, we see the bees hard at work over a 20-day period building new wax comb. These chambers will be used and reused as both storage and birthing chambers throughout the life of the hive. The life cycle begins with the birth of a new queen. Here we see worker bees, all female, assisting the young virgin queen to emerge. Released, she will hide briefly, but will soon go on a mating flight accompanied by a group of drones, or male bees, from neighboring hives. She only performs this mating flight once and will store the semen from her encounter for the rest of her life. When she returns to her hive, it is to take over as the new queen. The old queen has gotten the bee memo and has gathered half of the colony's workers to her and will leave to seek a new place to establish a colony. This exodus is called a swarm, and it is the mechanism for multiplying and diversifying the colonies. In this video from National Geographic, we see developing honeybees from egg to larva to pupa to adult. This cycle is carried out thousands of times over a season. It is the workers, however, who know the time to produce a new queen, usually when they have too many workers or the current queen is old or sick. While worker and drone brood are fed worker jelly, eggs destined to become queens are given a more enriched substance called royal jelly. This distinction in how the brood is fed is the thing that determines who is a queen and who is a worker or drone. Almost all of the occupants of a hive are female. This is determined by some instinct of the queen. These worker bees were produced from eggs that were fertilized with a single sperm that the queen acquired on her maiden flight. Males, called drones, are produced in much fewer numbers. To produce a drone, the queen chooses to withhold fertilization. Thus, unfertilized eggs produce male offspring. Why so few males? Their only purpose is to be able to fly, find the virgin queen with their huge eyes, and copulate. They have to be fed and cared for, cleaned up after, and the whole time doing nothing but waiting around for some young virgin to wink at him so he can fly off, have sex, and die. In the bee world, all of the heavy lifting is done by the ladies, and all but one is celibate for her entire lifetime. And we're back.
Most illuminating.
That was fun to do.
Yes.
The bees are doing very well, by the way. We're in honey production right now. They're building lots of comb, and we're getting lots of honey, and it's pretty cool what's happening in the hive.
No mites or things like that.
We haven't seen any. We're having a little problem right now with hive beetles. Interestingly, they eat the honey, and they're a problem with beehives in general. But apparently, you just put a cloth inside of your hive, and the little hooks on the hive beetle's back legs get caught in the cloth, and you simply you pull the cloth out, and they're all stuck to the piece of cloth, and you shake it out, and you put it back in, and you keep catching your hive beetle. So that was interesting to learn.
Very good.
So anyway, moving smartly forward, we have some questions in the hopper for you, Dr. Hal.
Very good. They keep coming.
This is a $15 question from Reverend Numina. And I love the poetry of this question. Does the black moon howl?
All right, a most interesting question. Does the black moon howl? Of course, does any moon howl? Clark Ashton Smith refers to the laughter of the moon. But this could be an example of transference. The moon is howled at, and thus it may in itself seem to howl in that its strange luminosity and nocturnal presence seems to prompt the howling. But what of the black moon at the dark of the moon, the new moon? Does it howl? Insofar as it produces or prompts, even if it cannot be seen in memory or knowledge, the impulse to make that ululation, so beloved of canid species and werewolves. Yes, one may say that the black moon howls, and who knows but that the howl the black moon elicits is not from a profounder and deeper region than the one which is casually elicited by seeing the moon in all its glory sailing through the treetops and the surrounding clouds.
Very good, Dr. Hal. We have a question here. They're very good questions tonight. I'm thrilled to come back to this wonderful pool of questions.
We appreciate that here on the show.
Yes, thank you, audience. Keep them coming. We're happy to hear them. I also have one that came in through our chat, which I'll be reading in a minute, and I assure you, it's a perfectly appropriate way to put them in. So, God.org, we appreciate your question, and however it gets to us, we're glad to answer it. In any event, here's a question from Reverend J. Cobblestone. It is a $10 question. What was your most recent drawing and what inspired it? And second part to that was, do you doodle at random or do you generally have an idea in mind before you begin?
Well, that's an interesting question. It's about my work method, but also about drawing and the function and purpose of drawing. To answer the first part first, which is only appropriate, my most recent drawing is part of an ongoing project where I am attempting to create a pseudo Jack T. Chick tract for my dear friend Bishop Joey of the First Church of the Last Laugh. My most recent drawing and ongoing project is the cover image for that tract, which involves a chick-like devil, which so often appears in his bromides, and a chick-like angel, both turning away from the background image of the Saint Stupid icon itself. The tract itself will be about it and be able to be distributed and given away at St. Stupid's Day Parade and other events that the Stupidites stage. And it might also serve as something to give away if you are unexpectedly presented with a little chick tract, since as entertaining as they are, we disbelieve in their central philosophy. As far as drawing itself, I find freedom in making drawings that do not have to be reproduced. Just to draw in the sand of the beach is liberating. And in the same way, making drawings on the newspaper, although those can be saved if you cut them out with a pair of scissors. However, the point of drawing is to draw, and one should always do it. The word doodle seems somewhat pejorative because it seems to make the drawings themselves minor, which, although they may be, hides the fact that they serve the greater purpose of invaluable practice.
Dr. Hal, I usually don't do this, but to my mind, that was an especially good question. It answered something that I kind of didn't even know I was curious about until he asked that question. So,
well, it did seem good.
Do you think that warrants a recitation?
I will do one. This is The Darkling Thrush by Thomas Hardy. I leant upon a coppice gate when frost was spectre gray, and winter's dregs made desolate the weakening eye of day. The tangled vine stems split the sky like springs of broken lyres, and all mankind that haunted nigh had sought their household fires. The land's sharp features seemed to be the century's corpse outlent. His crypt, the cloudy canopy, the wind, his death lament. The ancient pulse of germ and birth was shrunken, hard and dry, and every spirit upon earth seemed fervorless as I. At once, a voice arose among the bleak twigs overhead of a full-throated evensong of joy illimited, an aged thrush, frail, gaunt, and small in blast beruffled plume, had chosen thus to fling his soul upon the gathering gloom. So little cause for caroling of such delightful sound was written upon terrestrial things, afar or near around, that I could think there trembled through his happy midnight air some blessed hope, of which he knew and I was unaware. Thank you for your question.
Thank you, Hal. That was lovely.
Yes, I nearly said I knew and he was unaware, which would have spoiled it.
Everyone would have just been so disgusted and would have just, we would have lost audience over.
Yes, what's the point?
That would have been terrible.
Oh, well, here we go.
It would have completely broken the fact that everybody was sitting here mesmerized listening to you. It would have just broken the illusion completely. But anyway,
we shall do better next time.
Well, it was beautiful. It was beautiful. We have a band. It is a Subgenius band, which is always a pleasure to show on the Dr. Hal Show. And I'd like to play them for you. It's the first time we're playing this band. They performed.
You must be referring to Rubix Pube, who played at X-Day at the Land of Id nudist colony.
Indeed, I am, and so we're excited to have them appearing on our show tonight. So, without any further ado, here they are, the Rubix Pube.
We are now tuning in. 3, 2, 1. Put your hands together for Rubik's Cube!
Appearing tonight in Rubik's Pube, the Reverend Dr. Loch Ness Cleaver, Reverend Rob the Con, and Rev Lord Rock God. To hear more of the band, visit rubikspube.bandcamp.com. You will also find them on their Rubik's Pube YouTube channel. Be sure to catch them live at their upcoming show.
They were the best band that played at X Day.
Yeah, they sounded great. That was I like it more every time I listen to it.
Mm-hmm.
And I've heard it quite a bit this week, so it's grown on me quite a lot. I like it.
Are there more?
There
questions?
There are indeed. We have this is a $30 question, Dr. Hal.
Good Lord.
Good Lord indeed. Reverend Wolfgang Amadeus Gotthard says, actually, let me expand this. I have been away for the last few months. I have something of a two-part question. Here's the first part. Number one, Dr. Hal, do you have any opinion on the phenomena of undersea light wheels, with spokes of light rotating out to the horizon as occasionally seen on the open ocean? And I don't see a part two to that question, so I will be looking for that. Reverend Wolfgang Amadeus Goddard Damerung, if you have a part two, please let me know what it is. But in any event.
Yes, perhaps part two will come in. What is the opinion, if I have one, on the light wheels just beneath the surface of the ocean, which can sometimes be seen extending far into the ocean, even to the horizon? If one is standing on the shore, of course, one is always looking at the ocean in its coastal incarnation and not at the deep ocean. It is in these shallow areas, comparatively, rather than the benthic areas, that luminous bioluminescent life forms combine sometimes to create this phenomena. And then through refractive properties of the water, they are brought to our vision in shapes which resemble wheels, sometimes spirals with extending arms. The purpose of the light is not simply a byproduct or an exaptive function, but essential to these organisms in a way which there is still disagreement about. Yet, like every living thing that emits light, its ultimate function is reproductive and social in a reproductive context. It is interesting that the shores and the oceans light up. Sometimes sea creatures, even large ones, are also attended with bioluminosity. I don't know if that question is ideal. For some reason, the screen changed.
Sorry, I'm so sorry about that, Hal. My apologies. That was my mistake. I was looking for another question, and I, well, you know.
All right. Well, the sea and its mysteries are always something that is interesting to speculate on. Indeed, my own study of sea serpents has helped me formulate some of my own scientific ideas. $30 is a respectable donation for a question. So perhaps that also should mandate a recitation from me. Do you think?
Oh, yes, by all means, Dr. Hal.
Well, Thomas Hardy worked last time, and so I'll recite one from him again. This, you may be familiar with, is called The Convergence of the Twain. Lines written on the recent loss of the Titanic. In a solitude of the sea, deep, from human vanity and the pride of life that planned her, stilly couches she. Steel chambers late the pyres of her salamandrine fires, cold currents thrid and turn to rhythmic tidal lyres. Over the mirrors bent to glass the opulent, the sea worm crawls, grotesque, blind, dumb, indifferent. Jewels in joy designed to ravish the sensuous mind lie lightness, with all their sparkles bleared and black and blind. Pale moon-eyed fishes near gaze on the gilded gear and query, what does this vaingloriousness down here? Well, while was fashioning this creature of cleaving wing, the imminent will that stirs and urges everything, prepared a sinister mate for her so gaily great, a shape of, for the time, far and dissociate. And as the smart ship grew in stature, grace, and hue, in shadowy, silent distance grew the iceberg too. Alien they seemed to be. No mortal eye could see the imminent welding of their later history, or know that they were bent by paths congradient on being anon the twin halves of one august event, till the spinner of the years said, now, and each one hears, and consummation comes and jars two hemispheres. Thank you for your question.
And things that can only happen during a live show. What happened during the middle of your recitation was I swatted at a mosquito.
Good Lord. Things will be the death of us yet.
I hit the scene boards.
Well, there are immortal enemies, and they're a form of a fly, which is also the immortal enemy of humans. So it's not surprising that they should attack our show.
Oh my goodness gracious! But in any event, we see gremlins of all shapes and sizes here. But Hal, I think this would be a good opportunity for a monster movie moment.
That's a good idea, because we believe in the subgenius principle of Bull Dada, that hidden in what seems to be monster movies are actual profundities which illuminate our lives. So let's go to that monster movie moment now.
It is on its way.
In a speculated world, someone... A creation of Ray Harryhausen, wonderful dinosaur combat scene. Gregory Paul, a paleontological specialist and writer, mentioned in his now out-of-print book, Predatory Dinosaurs of the World, that there actually is evidence for a giant Ceratosaurus of the size seen there in the presence of one huge tooth that has been recovered. So we'll have to wait and see if Ceratosaurs survived their Jurassic era into the later ages of the Mesozoic. And how's the question hopper coming?
Oh, it's coming along quite well, Hal. We have a question here from Dr. Penny, and it is a $20 question.
Good Lord.
And again, we're getting such good questions tonight. What percentage of the Earth is hollow?
Well, of course, who's ever been there? Jules Verne spoke of the Central Ocean and the sea that his travelers described. But science doesn't seem to allow for that these days. As we go deeper, the pressure increases beneath the Earth's mantle until finally the Earth's core is molten. Even the core of Mars is molten at the present time, which is older and colder. Earth's moon, we do know, is hollow, and what may be in there might be subject for another question and answer session. But for many years, theories of a hollow Earth have been circulated. John Cleves Sims, an early writer, was the first to speculate about the inner world and its sun at the center of the Earth, which would illuminate it. The problem with all the projected inner worlds, including the Pellucidar of Edgar Rice Burroughs, is that they are not Newtonian, that there can't be islands and oceans on the inner side of the hollow, because everything would tend to fall into the sun at the center of the Earth. But what is this strange sun in the center of the Earth? Although Pellucidarians see it as a bright ball of fire like our own sun, it is actually very weak in the amount of heat which it illuminates. Otherwise, the interior of the Earth in this imaginary view would be fried by constant solar-like radiation without the intercession of night, something which never happens in Pellucidar. Perhaps there's some odd thing about this body, whatever causes it to exist, which causes the apparent Newtonian reversal of things being possible on the interior of the crust. The Russian writer Vladimir Obruchev, in his novel Plutonia, describes the interior sun as a solar or celestial phenomenon which at one time pierced the Earth's crust and is now continuing to burn in there. His party of Russians went into the center of the Earth and found the usual dinosaurs and pterodactyls, and beyond that, giant ants, and yet they created a considerable amount of ecological damage while they were there with their fires and other disruptions of the inner Earth ecology. Emerging in the Siberian region, they were interned during the First World War, and their story was delayed. But as interesting as the story of Plutonia or Pellucidar or the worlds seen by Verne's Hardwigg expedition, we don't believe it's actually in there. The most we can hope for is that there are large regions, not at the center, but nearer the crust of the Earth. Huge cave systems are constantly being discovered, even in our own time. Who knows what they may contain? I don't know if I answered the question, but there you are.
Well, you know, that's the thing, Dr. Hal. You answer the unanswerable questions, so it's difficult to know if you actually, in fact, answered them.
Well, we tried. I believe the new King Kong versus Godzilla movie, which I haven't seen, has a part where they visit the underground world at the center of the Earth, and I, for one, am anxious to see that part of the film, as well as the rest of it. Well, shall we continue?
Yes, I have one just popped in that I'm going to read real quick before it scrolls off the screen. This is from Reverend SPLR, so I'm not sure if that actually has pronunciation. My apologies if it does.
You sure it's not SPQR?
No, it's SPLR. Speller?
Oh,
Reverend
okay.
Speller.
Fine.
Well, in any event, you can correct me in our after show chat. Fraternal greetings to Dr. Hal. Long time no see. My question is, if you have one, what is your favorite exoplanet, and what are the prospects for Earthers exploring it? $10 in silver waits you today.
Well, of course, we know that there are planets in our solar system, and these are closer to our immediate vicinity than the ones that are farther away. Until fairly recently, we didn't know, though we suspected, that there were any at far distance. So now we know much more, thanks to our robot probes and other devices, of the other worlds in our own celestial backyard. Most interesting is the planet Pluto, with its giant moon Charon, a body so large that they both, Pluto and Charon, could be thought to orbit around each other. What is the mystery of the Plutonic surface? Why is it much warmer than it should be, being way out there in the cold zone of the solar system? What is the source of this heat? And why does it appear that there is perhaps even water on the surface? This is all very strange, and perhaps in the future we will know more about it. Also, recently it's been determined that the evidence of life is strongly suggested in the atmosphere of the planet Venus, a place which for a long time science has given up on as being the abode of life of any kind. Perhaps some sort of sentient gas bags float in the upper cloud layer of the Venusian atmosphere, and their life signatures of eating, dying, defecating, whatever, are what Earth's instruments have detected. The world of Europa around the giant gas planet in our system is also a possible abode of life. As you can see, there are many, and they are all of interest. But you ask which is my favorite. Not that I do prioritize, but what consumes my interest the most, for the most part, is the recently discovered Earth-like world in the system near our nearest starry neighbor in space, the Centauri system of Alpha and Proxima Centauri. This is the planet that is depicted in the movie Avatar. It is only 4.5 light years from Earth, and no one knows or not whether it does contain super tall blue-skinned aliens. However, it is quite interesting. This star is not visible from the northern hemisphere. You must go below the equator to see it, but it seems most interesting and coincidental that there would be a potentially Earth-like world in the vicinity of the nearest star, which at the present time we should possibly think of visiting. Therefore, my imagination is provoked by it, and therefore I could say that it is a favored celestial object in my contemplation, although I generally don't make David Letterman-like lists of the best or worst, since those tend to become frozen in one's mind.
Dr. Hal, I remember standing next to a little girl in a store selling olive oil, and she asked her mother what EVU meant. And I leaned over and whispered to her, extra virgin olive oil, and she felt very silly. So when I tell you the SPLR is shining path of least resistance, that's yes, I feel silly now. So I know how that
comes
little
all the
girl
way from the mysterious Orient,
yes,
where
indeed.
our friend Sven, subgenius of long note, has been kind enough to send us that question.
Very good. I have a $5 question here from Reverend Ramulak. And it is a question of what is your favorite Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam poem?
Well, aside from what I just said about not having favorites, this one is easy. My favorite Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam poem is the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam. Not to give a flip answer, but there is only one Rubaiyat. However, there are a number of different translations. Robert Graves provided one, which is an interesting one. However, what I've noticed in studying this is that the Fitzgerald translation, which is often decried for being Victorian and so on, actually has the actual cadence of the Rubaiyat in the original language, which Graves' translation does not. And I believe, from what I've been able to see of it, it is the best possible translation that we have received so far in English. Though it's always advisable, if multiple translations of a work not in English are available, to examine them and compare them, and thus derive from them all that is positive and promotes understanding of the writer's intent.
Dr. Hal, Reverend Ramulak assures us that it was a trick question.
Oh, really? Well, I probably failed the trick, but what was the trick? Could you say? If there are different translations, there are different versions of the Rubaiyat. But I began with a quote from Fitzgerald's translation. That is, the cadence, the meter is the same in the ancient form of the mathematician, astronomer, poet of ancient Persia and Fitzgerald's version. That is a great achievement for transliteration of a work from one language into another. Did he explain wherein the trick lay?
I think it was in saying that, which poem in the Rubaiyat is your favorite poem, when in fact the Rubaiyat is the poem. I think
well, he could ask me which stanza, and that would be difficult since there's so many of them that are good.
I think it was an inside-out question.
It might be, but maybe we've put it outside in.
But speaking of inside out, we have Zero Boy visiting us this month, and I'd like to go ahead and play that for you while the queue picks up. I do have questions out there, but it now would be a good time if you have any questions for Dr. Hal and would like to submit a love offering. Remember, you don't have to go out to our website. We trust you. Please feel free to put it into chat, and our stage ghost, St. Joyce, will make sure to get those to me. But for right now, Dr. Hal, we have Zero Boy, so I'm gonna.
Well, let's see our good friend Zero Boy.
I'm looking forward to it.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the new 2021 from Zip Zero Boy. 2020. Happy New Year. It's a Happy New Year in 2020. Hadn't seen my love in a while. Wasn't sure if I'd see her anytime soon. And, I enjoyed having a little bit of a cold flu in November, December. But then I started hearing the news. Wuhan, Wuhan. So what happens? We've been hearing about this disease, this flu, this COVID thing. People, they don't want to wear masks. Never heard about masks. Don't wear masks. But I'm watching all these videos, photos, films. They all have masks. China. People walking around spraying dead bodies in front of houses. And what do we have? In comes February. I get one night with my lover. Yay, happy birthday. And then within a week, fans visit. And it's lockdown. 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 I ran into some friends in Tompkins Square Park. They want to touch. No, don't touch me. I was the only one wearing a mask. No, it's 5G. Oh, no, it can't be that bad. Don't wear a mask. Only the people who need them are people who have it and the medical workers. And they gave us a lot of weird information. If you sit down somewhere someone's been for 9 days, the COVID will get into you and cover you. You'll touch your mouth and ventilator. And of course, I find out that my neighbor has it, which means I'm in quarantine, because if you're in the building with them, you're in quarantine. Well, that was fun. Stuck in the house. I think I'll walk 20. I don't have 20 feet in my apartment. I think I'll walk 7 feet. I think I'll walk 7 feet. I think I'll walk 7 feet. I'll stretch 7 feet. Well, quarantine ended. And a lot of people started posting up stuff about this so-called quarantine and pandemic and plandemic.
Oh, yeah, that video came in, and boy, she was really smart. She knows all about this problem that's going around the world. Oh, my God, Mikovich, she's such an important doctor. You should read her. What she's saying is true. Bill Gates wants to put a probe in your pee.
Some are called. Some step forward. And some just fall off the edge. Rode up and saw the freezer truck being built and 11 in operation for all those people that were dying, almost 1,000 a day. And it can't be real. No, it's no worse than a flu. And yet, a Spanish doctor says it's a flu. Or, oh my God, they're being paid $30,000 to say that it's COVID. COVID doesn't exist. You know how many people die of a flu? I know. At this point now, after January 1st, 350,000 people have died of a flu in America. So it was a very confusing year. The sun comes out, everybody wants to get out, and we have these restaurants that pop out with their beautiful outside stands. The New York City subways are the cleanest and emptiest we've ever seen them ever. So here we have this pandemic. And we're learning all these new things about it. Like, you're not going to die from touching something 9 days ago. You're really going to die from being indoors with somebody, if you're going to die. Well, it's like you really have to be ill or overweight to get it. I mean, otherwise, it's just really easy. Yeah, tell that to my friend dealing with the COVID long-haul stuff. Yeah, everyone's become a science major since they got on the internet. Oh, yes, masks don't work. That's why the places that went to masks stopped the virus. But masks don't work. Oh, that's right. Bill Gates is doing this. This has been a move they're making to take over our brains. Yes, they're going to put a probe in your butt so they can follow you around. They've got a probe in your telephone. Now, one thing about 2020. This will go down historically, unless it gets sandwiched between great world wars like the last pandemic. But what I think is really interesting is how connected people became with certain friends, and how also disconnected people became with certain friends, and how conspiracy theories. I know, I figured it out. You haven't even figured out how to put on your pants, and you figured it out. But I met a lot of different people, did some live, socially distant shows, and I thought that was pretty fun. Giving our heart to people, because that's what we do as performers. Somehow we can find different ways to cope during a huge societal event where people are dying. We didn't have that. What we had was well, it was only a cold to me. Oh, my friend died. Oh, she died. They died. Oh, well, they got sick. Nah, I barely felt it. Oh, I can't believe how tired I am 9 months later. Ba-dum-ba-dum-ba-dum-ba. But I met all these great performers who are all scattered. Met a lot of interesting people. In this great loneliness we call coronavirus. As I walk down the streets, realizing, wow, the city kind of closes down at 10 o'clock. 10 o'clock. I moved here so I wouldn't be in a town that was like, Bumble America, where everything gets shut down at 10 o'clock and the only thing open is the 7-Eleven with the creepy, skeezy-looking person in front. It's not unusual to see that people are cray-cray. Yeah, you'll find out who's got strength and who's got sorrow, who will be there today and who will be gone tomorrow. Yeah, it's been an interesting year, 2020, but I have to say I did learn quite a few great things. I learned a little bit of ukulele. Little bird, dung, 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 in the cinnamon tree, dung, 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 dung. And I also learned about my own abstinence and vices. You never knew how much I loved you. Ooh, you never knew how much I care. When you breathe your breath into me, I get a Rona that won't be gone. You gave me Rona. Boo, doo. That's right. Do. Everyone's nervous. Did I get it? Can I get it? Or they're very, I won't get it. I won't wear a mask. You people are fools. Well, we're all fools. I think 2020 has been a great year in a lot of ways. It's shaken out all the BS that has been infecting this society. And I think we should realize that change is inevitable. I called it the Great Reset early, only to find out they've been calling it the Great Reset for a few years, but this is definitely the Great Reset. I really hope that you have learned many things while isolated.
Well, we're back.
We are. But I'm doing pretty good with the microphone this time around, Dr. Hal. But I have a question here from GodDog.org for $11. And it's a interesting question. What is the solution to today's censorship problem? And how much do we censor, and by who?
Well, we censor what we don't want to see or hear. But that is not the problem. The problem is what others censor that we never get to see or hear, so that we cannot make up our minds. Children sitting at a scary movie will sometimes cover their eyes when the scary part happens. They can be entrusted to censor themselves. But if an adult hustles them out of the theater and not allows them to continue to be there, then it becomes a problem, because the strange subject of fear has never been banished. One has been removed from it, but knows that somehow it still exists. As for censorship, I, as a creator of intellectual properties, am against it, even though one must then allow things which are less than salutary when placed in the body politic, or in a larger sense, in the artifact of all human creation, which some call the noosphere. Still, the problem of cutting things off is a greater problem than allowing things to grow.
I have a question here from Johnny is Wrong. It is a $6 question. And why would a washer eat a sock now when a silk shirt is so much tastier?
Well, Johnny, I don't know if you're aware that I wrote a book about doing laundry and about the missing sock problem. That book, though out of print, I believe is available if you want it enough. I wrote it and illustrated it. It's called The Meaning of Lost and Mismatched Socks. In it, I posited many of the possible reasons that socks disappear from the wash. But I also mentioned where shirts had disappeared from the wash, because it is sometimes true that the process of washing a garment tends to make it come apart. And in the lint basket, one may ultimately find telltale threads which were once an integral part of a garment. But the shirt, let me remind you, Johnny, is larger than a sock. Your washing machine has an outflow valve, and sometimes this can claim a free-floating sock. It is less likely to suck out anything larger, such as a shirt, particularly a long-sleeved shirt. Its very voluminousness and complexity causes it to wind into the rest of the laundry and thus be held on and not able to depart forever from our holdings and possession. But there is always a mystery when things disappear, something that my book also mentions as it advances a somewhat outre theory toward the end. I recommend going to the index of the book also, since one may approach its content by looking up topics in the index. But let me assure you, though you may lose a sock in the mystery manner, whatever the mystery may be, you will not lose the shirt, at least in the same way.
Glad Johnny mentioned that, because at some point in time the show has...
Oh, you have the book.
I have a few of these books, and at some point in time, we'd like to make these available.
Well, I
So,
wish I had a copy. I don't think I have any more, but good. I'm glad. Maybe they'll be a collector's item someday.
well, the idea is to get you these copies before the audience gets their copy. So that would.
Can you hold up the picture of the sock-based life forms that's inside the book?
I certainly can, Dr. Hal. I believe they're included in the beginning of the show. There's a good sock-based life form.
Oh yes, as if socks were part of a sock planet where all the abandoned socks found themselves. Then sock-based life might theoretically be supposed to arise. At any rate, that is one suggestion the book makes. Thank you for holding that up, and Johnny, thank you for your question.
And imagine a future where you could have one of these books that just happened to be in Dr. Hal's possession before you got it. Imagine what the possibilities could be. So
They're inexpensive. I could sign it, but let's leave that for another day.
Think about it. Well, in any event, we have more questions, Dr. Hal. We have part 2 of Reverend Wolfgang Amadeus Scotter Damerung's question. And let me view the details here. With some of the recent UFO revelations in the news, I noticed the detail that these strange lights and craft seem to have no problem exiting and entering the ocean. This put me in mind of Ivan Sanderson's 1970 book, Invisible Residence. Do you, wait, there might be a part 2 to this, hold on. Bear with me for 1 minute. Yes, here it is. Do you have any opinion on the idea of an intelligent, water-breathing race that evolved roughly parallel, or perhaps before, the human race in our vast oceans? Might they be saucer pilots?
Well, this also has been thought of previously. There is nothing new under the sun, and it could be that something like James Cameron's non-terrestrial organisms, NTIs, are being speculated about. The difficulty in things that fly through the atmosphere is always in how do they get there? How do they take off? It is easier to take off from the land than it is from the ocean. But then perhaps we are restricting our imaginations by considering things that are seen flying in our atmosphere as being solid objects propelled by similar systems that support our aircraft. It could be they are in the sky because the sky is the best place for them. These sun dogs, moon dogs, spinning cloud forms, and other things which have been seen and attested but have never been properly identified. Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, in his story The Horror of the Heights, speculated that there might be something like a celestial or upper atmospheric, evanescent but deadly giant squid, which in his story was picking off aviators. Then there were the so-called fireflies seen by astronaut John Glenn when his Freedom 7 capsule orbited the Earth. Of course, we could fall back on the hoary cliche that there are more things in heaven and earth dreamt in your philosophy, my dear Horatio. But, of course, this is no answer, but simply an indication that one chooses not to speculate. I think we restrict ourselves if we think that everything that we see that is unknown or identified is the production of a rival intelligence and represents a solid object that is similar to a metal ship riveted together. There may be many ways of leaving the aquatic medium or entering the aerial medium. It would be foolish to make up one's mind when we don't have all the information we have. But the joy of speculation on this topic is unconfined.
Might be a good time to remind everyone that now would be a great time to get questions into Dr. Hal. So if you have a question, please get it into chat or into our Ko-fi section. We will be happy to answer it.
That's true. We're going to have to wrap this thing up before too long, but I'm enjoying answering your questions, and I hope you're enjoying listening to the answers. What comes next, Pontius?
Well, we're moving smartly forward, Hal. So we're about to enter the point in time where we're going to look at our second monster movie moment.
Ah, yes. The monsters are always ready for our examination.
I am going to push the button.
The invasion of the body snatch.
And we're back. Well,
and how is that question queue looking?
It's well, we're getting to I believe the end of our questions. It seems to be slowing down a bit. So, but I have an interesting one that came from St. Joyce. This is a $20 question, and she was wondering, how many nipples does a kangaroo have?
Well, that's an interesting question. It is, of course, a specific question, which we feel is not as fun as those wherein speculation may enter in, but $20 is most generous. So let me speak of the nipples that a kangaroo has. Most mammals are named that because they have mammary glands, and these mammary glands have nipples. Although the monotremes, epitomized by the duck-billed platypus, really runs milk down hairs which the young ingest. So there are no actual breasts or nipples there. But the kangaroo, although a marsupial, does have a structure of mammae and nipples. And the kangaroo is also distinguished by another unusual feature, not an even, but an odd number. In point of fact, a kangaroo has 13 nipples. It has a structure of 12 nipples surrounding a central nipple, which makes up the 13th. And so the recently born joeys, or young kangaroos, are able to feed without jostling each other or preventing their siblings from coming to full growth. Thank you for such an interesting question and such a generous provision.
We have I wanted to bring this to your attention, Dr. Hal. We have a mention here from Reverend Numina in our Ko-fi queue. Thank you for answering my question during X Day, and it is a $15 love offering that he passed along. So
that's great. I wish I could remember the specific question, but I hope I answered it to his satisfaction. Apparently I did, since the love offering has been tendered.
And I believe I have another one in the queue that I'd like to mention that's along the same line. Reverend Shining Path of Least Resistance also sent $10 with there was no question attached to it, but I believe we did answer a question from him earlier. So that
thank Dobbs for such generosity in the ranks of the subgeniuses.
And I do have another question here for you, and I'm going to find it here for you in just a moment. We had quite a number of questions tonight, Doctor.
Good. Well, that's what drives our show.
And it was a question about the true history of coffee. Where did I lost it? Yes. That's right. Oh, yes, here it is. Reverend Xenofact. It is a $20 question.
Oh, boy.
And what is the true history of coffee?
Well, of course, the coffee bean is central to the history of coffee. Coffee must be produced from these beans, which grow on a plant which also bears berries. And when harvested, it can be made into the delicious mixture, which has changed our civilization, I would say, entirely for the better. It was in the 17th century that coffee houses in Europe began to proliferate as this beverage grew in popularity. In today's Amsterdam, you can visit some of those original coffee houses, and they are still now, as they were then, intellectual gathering places. The coffee stimulates not just the heart and the inner body, but also the mind, and promotes an atmosphere in which the matters of the day may be discussed, and which aesthetic concepts may be enjoyed. Throughout the years, many have attempted to paint coffee as a harmful herb and beverage, but this, to the best of my knowledge, is not at all true. In fact, coffee is considered a healthful beverage, with a few caveats. One is that one should not drink coffee too hot. This is a very recent scientific finding, which suggests that there may be negative health effects from that. But as far as caffeine, it is a useful substance and a friend to human beings. $20, I should do something if there's time. Is there?
Hal, there is always time.
Well, there's always time, but then perhaps we'll lose our audience from being too long, but I'll do a recitation here.
Ladies and gentlemen, show of hands. Anybody? No, Hal, everybody seems to be okay. So let's go.
Very good.
Good.
Well, this comes from Dylan Thomas. The force that through the green fuse drives the flower, drives my green age, that blasts the roots of trees is my destroyer. And I am dumb to tell the crooked rose, my youth is bent by the same wintry fever. The force that drives the water through the rocks drives my red blood, that dries the mouthing streams, turns mine to wax. And I am dumb to mouth unto my veins how from the mountain spring the same mouth sucks. The hand that whirls the water in the pool stirs the quicksand that ropes the blowing wind, hauls my shroud sail. And I am dumb to tell the hanging man how of my clay is made the hangman's lime. The lips of time leach to the fountainhead. Love drips and gathers, and the fallen blood shall calm her sores. And I am dumb to tell the weather's wind how time has ticked a heaven round the stars. And I am dumb to tell the lover's tomb how at my sheet goes the same crooked worm.
Lovely, Dr. Hal. I thought that was going to be the last question, and then I shook our jar, and one fell out.
Well, what do you know about that?
And it had $9 attached to it, so it was. I'm going to pass this one along. So that's
$9 worth of legitimacy. There.
It's $9. So
right.
It's from Reverend Gate. It's from Reverend Gate, and I'd like to know this myself. What will be the next big thing?
The next big thing?
The next big thing.
It could be anything, It could be a whale. That's a big thing. I mean, the big thing in the chatter between people, the big thing in art, the big thing in literature. But one hopes that there will be a big thing in the sense of the thing being a big change, which we all desire. Greater and greater is our desire for this big change or big thing with the passing of every day, while we are forced to deal with the unpleasantness of the lockdown and the pandemic that some people who refuse to address it are inadvertently prolonging. The situation might be compared to the end of the First World War and the earlier pandemic that we had of the terrible flu, which killed so many people. After the pressure of these events had vanished, came the Roaring Twenties, a great loosening of sexual mores and experimenting in new forms of literature and art, wild dances, amazing new things like science fiction magazines, and the creation of enduring immortal characters in the literary realm, although literary snobs don't acknowledge them. That period produced Tarzan, Zorro, Charlie Chan, and a number of imaginary beings whose exploits from then on have entertained many of us. But for those of us who are not interested in the exploits of a Doc Savage, for example, there is still the opportunity to kick up one's heels, not only metaphorically, but actually. And this can be the next big thing until we are swamped by the big thing following, which we hope will not be a worldwide depression followed by another war. Does history really repeat itself in such a fashion, or does it only echo the past as it forms? We shall find out.
Well, yeah, I guess we will. Our question queue, Hal, has come to a close, but I wanted to sort of end the show on a down note. We lost one of our cast members. You may have noticed this was a bit of a quiet show.
Yes.
We didn't have Saint Ink Finger backing us with his wonderful guitar.
But he made an outro for us before his death, did he not?
And interestingly enough, so when we had our meeting to put the show together, and we asked him what he was going to play for tonight, he said this particular song, and it's one of his original songs. He wrote this, so we won't get a copyright hit, which is always fun. And it's a very sweet song, and I think everybody's going to like it, and I think it's a proper outro. So or he's going to be sorely missed. He was a good friend to a lot of people, and he was always kind of a bright and shining light in the room,
and a sub-genius,
and ornery as the day is long. So it's
yes.
It's going to be a very sad thing. So, but in any event, thanks everybody for coming tonight, and sorry to end it on a downer, but it's, it's appreciate what you got while you got it.
While you have it, yes.
So we'll see you next month.
You're selling yourself one more time. Maybe passing by you soon. Why should I lie? Is it such a crime that I wanted to hold you too? I wanted to hold you too. And it seems to be taking its toll on me.
Thank you for joining us this evening. Please join us at our after-show video chat. For more information, go to gonzotronics.net/ADH for Ask Dr. Hal.